This is Sweet 16, the podcast series where musicians revisit that teenage year where everything changes. This episode was recorded in front of a live audience at the Erased Tapes Sound Gallery in London on Monday the 23rd of April 2018. Our guest that night was Joe Mount from Metronomy. He joined host Greg Cochran from Loud and Quiet magazine to talk about that teenage year and play some of the music that reminds him of being 16.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Joe. So this podcast is all about being 16. So just set the scene for us. When you're 16, what year was it? What year did you turn 16? And where were you? Where were you growing up as a teenager then?
It would have been 1998. I turned 16. And I was, a mess of hormones, I should think. And I was in Devon. I always forget when you're 16, that's kind of when you start sixth form, yeah?
Yeah. Or
so
just finishing GCSEs, going to sixth form, I guess.
So I was going to sixth form. I think I had a pretty good time at school. Mm-hmm. So I think I was, feeling like great. Yeah. It was
Totnes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've never visited Totnes before. What kind of a place is it for a teenager?
So when I was there, it was quite an exciting place. There was used to be an art college very close by, so there were loads of students around the town. There were kind of school-age children, and then there was also a massive art students. So and then there were people from whatever at that age upwards. So it was actually quite a kind of youthful place, and that's changed now because the college has gone. But it was it just felt like a really there was stuff happening, kind of, and because of the art college, quite kind of unusual stuff happening. And I'd managed to, by the time I was 16, I'd met very good friends who were kind of into music and started playing in bands with them and started kind of finding our own way in the world of music listening. So it was a really great place to grow up.
Before we go any further, I need to establish an important fact. Did you have a nickname when you were 16? And if so, what was it?
No, I didn't have a nickname. Someone, some skateboarder. So I used to skateboard, and one day this man from Birmingham came to the town. He just moved there, and he was very exciting because he had a regional accent. And
exotic.
And we were like, "Oh, what's your name?" It's like, "Oh, my name's Ziggy." Ziggy. Anyway, it's like Ziggy. I was like, wow, that's a cool nickname. He's called Ziggy. And he started calling me Pop, right? Because I used to go to Safeway and buy the fizzy drinks. So that was kind of exciting. Hear someone call it Pop was pretty cool. But and then one day I went to his house to call on him, and his dad answered the door, and I was like, oh, it's Ziggy. And the guy was like, who? I was like, Ziggy. I was like, oh, Daniel. And turns out, so he basically reinvented himself coming to our town, which I quite respected. So anyway, I didn't have a nickname. Pop was what he was. Ziggy used to call me Pop.
Ziggy Pop. Wait a second. What was family life like? You got siblings?
I got a sister. Yeah.
Okay, and how did you get on in those teenage years?
Well, she would have pretty well. Yeah, very well. And then she would have left for university. She's 2 years older, so she would have left when I was 16. So it was I had the place to myself for the first time. And definitely with her gone, it was easier.
You could get away with anything.
Well, no, I don't know. I don't want to be too rude about teenage girls. But she was quite demanding, and when she left the house, I felt quite relaxed for the first time. I mean, no offence. I hope people understand.
Yeah, we've got a photo. So the people here that are with us tonight, but also people that are listening to this will be able to see this online as well. We've got a photo of you at 16.
I think I was younger than 16 in that
okay.
picture. I've worked. I think I was maybe 15.
Okay, for people that can't see this right now. Just describe what the photo is showing and where you were when it was taken.
That's me and my sister in Berlin on a kind of one of only a few family holidays that we had in the kind of teenage years, I think. And that was looking at our future. together.
looking at a building site, Jack.
Yeah, well, that was what
You're
it
going
used
to go
be
into
like.
property.
It was quite, it was quite impressive. Berlin. I think even then, I don't know if anyone goes there much, but yeah, then it was like just cranes everywhere.
That would be considered a very cool family holiday now.
Yeah, I suppose it would, but at the time it was, we just argued.
Yeah. What kind of things did you do as a family apart from going on the occasional holiday? Did you like sit down at meal times? Were you like a close family? Did you get on well?
Yeah, we generally speaking got on very well. Yeah, but I don't think ever really. I don't know. I think probably like didn't necessarily sit down and have dinner together. I think maybe me and my parents did.
Sister was like, I'm off.
Yeah, but no, like very close. Yeah, very close, and kind of luckily so. I think, and my parents are together still, so very kind of well-rounded.
What kind of teenager were you? Were you content? Were you stroppy? Were you slamming the bedroom door? Were you argumentative? Were you shy? What do you remember of being 16?
I was the poster boy of being a 16-year-old boy. I think I was great. I was really great. No, I managed to kind of. Are there any second children here?
Any second children in the house?
Any second children in the house? Say what?
Give us a
I think generally speaking, you get quite an easy kind of go of things after a while. Now I've got 2 children, and I feel sorry for the younger one because we just don't really pay attention to him. but you begin to see. Then I can imagine. But when he reaches kind of teenage years, he's going to just be so relaxed. He's already got the sense of humor of someone twice his age, And I think you kind of end up. So you kind of. You're able to just watch what goes on and kind of then just not make the same mistakes or stuff like that.
Were your parents stricter with your sister?
I think only because she was a bit of a. No, I'm aware that she might listen to this. That's kind of why I'm. No, they were. My parents were very relaxed, and they weren't strict with either of us. And I got in more trouble for that kind of stuff. I was way worse at. Kind of concealing things. I do kind of naughty stuff, and they would find out, whereas my sister would kind of do the same stuff but manage to get away with it.
You mentioned earlier you would have been, I guess, maybe finishing GCSEs going into A-levels. What kind of student were you like at school?
I was very every school report that I have, I think it uses the word cruise. It says that I cruise.
You were cruising.
Yeah, and I think literally I basically didn't. I really loved things like science and maths, but I was just not very good at them. So I would kind of think that I'd do lessons and feel like I kind of got something, and then get quite upset because I obviously didn't. Yeah. And then, I just kind of got by with most of the subjects, I think. And then a few I really enjoyed, yeah. What
kind of stuff were you discovering that you were, took up at A-level where you were like, I like this and I'm good at it?
Media studies. Well, that's really interesting.
Broadcasting.
All this kind of stuff. I did. My A-levels were just kind of lame. I mean, they weren't lame, but they were what were the easiest ones I could have chosen?
Art.
Very good.
Drama.
No, drama. I did GCSE drama.
Did you?
Yeah. But no, I did media studies, art and music technology.
Okay. What I have to ask, what did you get in music technology?
A B, I think. A B.
Okay. Room for improvement.
Yeah, definitely still is. Definitely.
Did you enjoy studying? Because I guess that's the theoretical side of music. Was that interesting at the time? Were you into that side of it?
Technology. I mean,
music tech, I suppose.
Tech, yeah. No, that was more I mean, the thing is it was a subject which gets kind of out, the kind of time scale of the stuff you learn is 6 months before it becomes kind of obsolete. So I learned about things which no one does anymore. Yeah. But the idea of it was I guess the way that I saw it was through the whole period of cruising, I was just at a very young age, like a surprisingly young age, like casting just possible futures like to one side. It's been like, well, like, yeah, science, like I'm interested, but like it's way too difficult. It's like, okay, I'm not going to become like a doctor. And then, you know, the same with all that kind of stuff. And like English, I really enjoyed it. And because like my dad and my sister had a kind of have this proper kind of literary thing going on, like that rubbed off on me a bit. But I was never very, like, I wasn't very good at English. So I, you know, pushed that to one side. And by the time I was doing like media studies and art, like it was quite, I burnt a lot of bridges, I think.
Who was your best mate when you were 16?
16? Who was my best mate? Probably my mum.
Was it? Still my best mate.
16, I think that was a curious time because I had like all these old friends who I'd known throughout my whole kind of education. And then I had friends, the kind of music friends that I had. So I like this guy Gabriel who used to play in Metronomy. He kind of came into my life and like I was obsessed with him. And he became like, I don't know if I was his best friend. He was my best friend. And then I had a girlfriend at the time who was like really interesting and like into kind of crazy music I'd never heard about before. So like I spent a lot of time with her as well. She was my best friend as well.
What was it about Gabriel that attracted you to him?
Oh, have you seen him?
He's a good-looking guy. Like musically, did he seem like he kind of he brought with him an aura of music knowledge?
He was just, it was crazy. We were so I was at secondary school. It was the big like secondary school assembly, and he came out onto stage with this band, and he had like a Les Paul. It turns out he was obsessed with the Stone Roses, who I'd never heard of at 16, of course. And he like came out with like a Les Paul guitar, flares, the kind of a daisy chain around his head, and then him and this guy called Richard in this band performed an original composition called Daisy Chain, which was kind of, I didn't realize, but it was alluding to something like a kind of, anyway. I was just like, this guy is like incredible. Like, who is he? And it turns out that he'd come from like, he'd had a pretty bad time at another secondary school, and so like was slightly reinventing himself as well. But he was just, I don't know, he came from Reading, which seemed like the like he was into things like the Stone Roses, came from Reading. It just seemed like like he was
quite
incredible.
exotic.
Yeah, really exotic. Yeah. And like quite kind of like he's quite a camp guy, and had this insanely attractive girlfriend who he's married to now. And I remember just thinking like, this is probably the coolest man I've ever met. I mean, like, yeah, I was wrong. But he almost is.
We're going to talk a bit about music more in a bit, because Joe's brought some music that he was listening to when he was 16. We're going to play a little bit in a few moments. But before we get onto that, can you remember what your ambitions were when you were 16? What were the things that you were dreaming of becoming?
I would have been dreaming of becoming a musician, really. And at that point, I was like playing drums in a band with Gabriel. So I thought that was my future, was to be the drummer. I was just cruising until that happened.
Feels like you've just cruised into real success, Joe.
No, honestly, it feels like that sometimes.
Outside of music,
no, I've never. That sounded really I don't mean that. I don't mean that. It just
happened. Outside of music, what were your main interests? What things were you doing? Were you playing sport? Were you going out? What things were you doing at 16?
I think I still skateboarded a bit when I was 16.
Okay. Was it a good sort of skate scene, like a skate park, a place for like people could actually go?
Me and some friends, we got together and went to the local council and petitioned for a skate park. So yeah, if you go to Totnes and use the skate park, that's because me and my friends made it happen.
Do they have like a plaque there?
There isn't a plaque, no. There's some dudes smoking weed, probably. But yeah, like, I mean, really, I was into that. Like, I think I was into music and kind of probably like, I don't know, yeah, like hanging out, that kind of thing.
That's what you do when you're 16, though.
Yeah,
Were mates coming over to yours? Were you going over to mates? Did you have a place that you went? You didn't go. Would you go to the? Well, I guess the skate park, obviously, but
There were we had lots of like, you have I think you just have friends whose parents like let you do. Certain parents turn blind eyes to things.
yeah, it's totally true.
So
the ones that are lax, you're like, let's go around to their house.
Yeah. So I think that was kind of it, really. In fact, when I think about it, it all sounds a bit depressing, really. But yeah, I didn't really have any other interests apart from just like having a good time.
That's fine. That's what teenagers are about, isn't it? Should we play some music? Should we hear some music? Joe's brought with him 3 selections this evening, and we're going to hear a bit of each. I'll introduce the first one. This is the first track that Joe's brought with him that he was listening to when he was 16. This is DJ Shadow, High Noon. Can you remember the first time you listened to DJ Shadow, Joe?
Yeah, it was my friend Ziggy, who I'm realizing...
That guy again.
Yeah, that guy. This guy Ziggy, he was really into Mo-Wax records, and I think I didn't really know much about record labels, I suppose, or like the idea of like the kind of like an ethos or something of a record label, and so he was obsessed with Mo-Wax and was like playing Introducing all the time. And then I went on like this weird school, they do like a Christmas school shopping trip to Bath for Christmas shopping for my school. And I went to it was nice. I went to a record shop and I bought that record and like, I think that was the kind of, I don't think I'd even heard it. I was just like, oh yeah, DJ Shadow, this is really cool.
Just to pedal back a bit before we talk more about DJ Shadow, in terms of discovering music, by this point you're 16, drumming in a band, discovering people like DJ Shadow. But when are your first experiences with music? Was it parents' record collection? Where did that, basically the seeds of all that develop?
I think it would have been them, really. I mean, that and the fact that, like I was saying, so where I grew up was, and where they still live is like on the campus of this kind of now closed art college. But they also used to have really interesting like concerts, and my mum's job was to photograph stuff that was happening there. So there'd be these kind of, I don't know, like all night kind of Indian concerts and things like this, which seemed quite normal. I think I would just follow her around when I was very young and soak it all in, I guess. And they're not musical, but they like, they're really into music. So I think it was just a kind of combination of that, really.
Are there any records that just remind you of home? Like if you go, do parents still live in Totnes?
Yeah.
So when you walk through the door at home, what do you immediately think of? For me, it's my dad listening to Black Sabbath. But is there anything like that for you?
What do you mean, that like stuff that they would listen to?
Yeah,
I don't know. They don't. It's not. I guess now it doesn't quite happen so much that like. I mean, there are records which I kind of remember like hearing them play, but I don't know, the ones that I really remember are kind of the slightly embarrassing ones, like
go on,
Simply Red, maybe.
So I think wasn't it mandatory that everybody had a copy of Simply Red at that point?
Yeah, and like 10,000 Maniacs, I remember like hearing that, which is that's kind of slightly cooler one. But then when I got into their kind of, when I realized that they had all these good records, I'd start listening to the more interesting things. And my dad would like pick up kind of, I don't know, like things like a Babushka by Kate Bush, and which I remember like listening to and thinking it was nuts. There's not really necessarily like a music which makes me think of them or like a band or something.
With DJ Shadow, was that like a turning point for you? Like before that, were you into a certain type of music, and then you heard that and you were like, it blew your mind?
I mean, not. It's weird, and like I don't know if so that I've you know we talked before about being young and getting into music, and like I think that because I was into skateboarding. I wasn't very good, but I used to watch a lot of skateboard videos, and they had like such a diverse soundtracks that there were things like I remember like Dr. Octagon was on a skate video, and then there was also other kind of things like 99 Red Balloons. I remember I first heard like on a skate video, and like Busta Rhymes and things like that. And so I think that by the time I was listening to DJ Shadow, I had heard like I was already kind of getting into all kinds of stuff. But I think the reason that DJ Shadow was quite appealing was that it sounded so like dense, but it was just this guy on his own, and I think that was like I'd been playing in a band, and I started getting interested in making my own music, and I was kind of finding out about these like this whole it's not really a community, but because they're quite solitary people, but like a whole world of people making music on their own, and how you could like your imagination was kind of the limit of what you could do in a way.
This is a bit of a spoiler, but there's no Joe. You haven't brought any Britpop with you tonight to play. And
honestly, like the closest I came to doing that was putting the Cardigans on there, which isn't even Britpop, but
Swede pop.
And then there's this radio station called like Absolute Radio, Absolute 90s. Anyone check that out? Anyway, they play like stuff from the 90s, and you realise there's a lot of awful music. Like Britpop, there was some awful Britpop, and even if you hear Blur now, I think it doesn't make me feel particularly good. You know?
Did you just ignore it at the time, or did you actively make the decision that you just weren't into that?
My sister was into Blur, I remember listening to Park Life a lot. Is that the name of the album?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Not just that song.
Yeah.
Oh,
isn't it?
We loved Park Life. And I got into Elastica, and it's like me and her had a kind of pretty good like musical sparring thing going on. So she was like, I was into Weezer, and then she kind of got into Weezer. I was into PJ Harvey before her as well. She was into Blur. And like it was that kind of that thing. I mean, like in the end, she was into Pulp as well, which I kind of stole off her. Like Pulp were good. Pulp was still good. But I think probably I was more into Weezer, and then I got into more like men alone making music stuff.
This is a time before, obviously, YouTube, Spotify, etc. You already mentioned that you discovered some music by watching skate videos. Mm-hmm. What were the other places that were introducing you to music? Are we talking MTV era here? Like Radio 1?
My friend from Reading, another friend from Reading had MTV. And I remember like it was properly, I mean, if you were into music and going to someone's house who had MTV, like it was incredible. You could just sit there, and like they were bored of it, but you're just like, no, like I don't want to leave. I just want to watch these videos, and videos were great as well. I mean, they're still great, but like, if you hadn't seen music videos, you're just like, oh wow, this is crazy.
There must have been one video that just kept appearing on MTV that you remember.
But honestly, like, it didn't. I mean, I could probably tell you the amount of times I've sat and watched MTV. Like, it was when I went to see my friend Sam. That was like a weekend, so that would have been like 3 days of watching MTV. A friend later in my life called Toby had MTV, and he used to record it, and then I'd take the VHS back to Brighton, like university. I'd still be. So yeah, I think 5 times I've watched MTV, and recently I've watched it, but they don't do music anymore.
No, they do like soap, like reality TV. That's their thing now. Shall we play another track? Do you want to introduce this one?
Yeah, and this was like, honestly, I really struggled to pick songs for this because it was quite a decent year for music. 98, like 99 was pretty good. And I was listening to a lot of stuff, and I had a job, so I was hearing stuff on the radio. But it's like an Armand Van Helden song. And what's it called? It's like, I don't even know.
You Don't Know Me.
You Don't Know Me, okay.
Should we play it and chat about it afterwards?
Yeah, okay. No, I'm going to talk over it.
Armand Van Helden. Why do you love that song, Joe?
It smells like a tune, isn't it? It's a tune.
Still sounds good.
There was like a whole load of there's a whole load of dance music in around 98 that was like chart music. I don't know, like Fatboy Slim, that kind of thing, like Basement Jaxx, like Daft Punk, like all this really commercial music that was actually very cool and like sounded great. And I think that was like, that kind of represents songs that like the people who I was at school with who didn't like music would like that song, and I would kind of be a bit like, what is this? And then after a while you're like, oh, this is actually like really good. And so I think it was like about that age when I started understanding, I don't know, like just that you don't have to, because I guess I was into, I thought I was like into Mo Wax or something like that, like kind of more niche stuff. And then you start to feel like you have to be a kind of specialist or like just be into one thing. And then when you find yourself like liking Armand Van Helden or Jason Evans as well as like another, was like almost one I chose. Be like, oh, this is really good, but it doesn't really fit into what I think I'm doing here. And now when I hear like that song or like Jason Evans, like, oh, this is like a really good song, and maybe I should have paid more attention to that.
What was it like at school? Was there like a sixth form common room with a stereo on that people used to fight over? Because that was a thing at my college.
It had like quite a nice, like a jukebox actually, which is, so at sixth form there were these girls who were well into like new metal, and so that was often on the jukebox was things like Crazy Town we were talking about.
Crazy Town, Limp Bizkit, Korn, Papa Roach, all of my favourites.
Yeah.
If this was my Sweet 16, we'd kind of be doing that.
I think Crazy Town played in Torquay once. I remember talking. There were these twins who were into new metal, who basically taught me about new metal, and they were talking about Crazy Town, how they'd seen them at like some tiny venue in Torquay, which is kind of impressive. But yeah, so that the jukebox kind of had that stuff was often played.
Armand Van Helden's a big club track, obviously. Now, at 16, you're too young to go to a nightclub.
Oh, no.
Oh, no? Different in Totnes.
No. I went like...
Did you have a fake ID, Joe?
Oh, this is... So I had a friend of mine who was a skateboarder, I met this dude. He was at the university near my parents' house, near my house, and he would say he would have been like 20 something. I was 16, and he was like going back to Brighton on the holidays, and he's like, oh, you should come skating in Brighton. And so I was like, yeah. And I went to Brighton for the first time, and there's a club. There was like an old place called the Gloucester in Brighton, and they're like, oh, let's go. And I was like, I can't go to a club, like I'm 16. And they're like, oh, here you go, like here's my driver's license for like like a 20. I think it was a 21-year-old. And I definitely didn't look 21, so I like wore a beanie, and managed to get in, and wore this beanie all night in a club because I was terrified. But I went clubbing all the time, once.
Did you enjoy it? Was because that's it's a different experience altogether, isn't it?
I don't think I really enjoyed it. I was just afraid of getting found out. I mean, I enjoyed the I think I just enjoyed the watching people and imagining that I don't know. I think when I was that age, I was kind of obsessed with getting a girlfriend or having I mean, this was before I had the girlfriend I mentioned earlier, I should say. But I think I was at the club imagining oh, someone's gonna just come up to me, be like, hey,
that's what clubbing is. Yeah. When was the first time you heard a Metronomy record played in the club, and what did that feel like?
That was Trash. Errol played it at Trash, and it sounded awful. It sounded so bad compared to everything else. No, but actually, no, it wasn't. It wasn't him at all. It was sorry. That sounds like It was actually Andrew Weatherall. At this, I used to work on. There was when I moved to Brighton, I kind of made friends with these guys who ran this club, which wasn't very popular, but it was they were into Warp Records, and they managed to get Andrew Weatherall to DJ, and they were putting out a kind of EP which had a song of mine on it, and he started his set with it as a kind of gift to these friends who put on the night, and it sounded awful as well. And then years later, when Errol played it, it also sounded awful compared to the other stuff.
What did it feel like being in Trash when Errol played it? Presumably you were with pals, and then they were like, "Yeah, he's playing your song."
I mean, I guess it was because at that point I wasn't living here, and I would have been living in Brighton, I think, and yeah, I think it was. I don't know, it's embarrassing, really. I think when it happens, unless it sounds brilliant. But I think I just remember thinking oh god, this sounds really bad. Feeling kind of excited, but then just watching people walking off the dance floor.
What kind of other stuff was being played that night? Was it Block
classics,
Party?
mate, yeah.
Kaiser Chiefs? No, what was
Kaisers?
Kaisers. No, this is
well. I think that was that would have been the Claw.
Okay, yeah. Tom Beck.
Probably
kind of stuff.
Tom Beck. It was the Glorious. Yeah.
They don't make music like that anymore.
Klaxons, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It was. I think he would play quite kind of clubby sets, and then throw in a Metronomy song when people needed the toilet. That kind of.
Broadly speaking, when you think back to the music that you were into when you were 16, are you quite pleased with the stuff that you were listening to? Because I look back and I think that's just terrible. I'm glad that I left all that behind. But are you, broadly, are you quite chuffed?
I'm really I really am, and I don't think I remember being really into the Beastie Boys, the Hella Nasty record, and that was something I was thinking about for this. And then I was listening to it again, and I was thinking, actually, I'm not sure I'm that into it anymore. I love the Beastie Boys, but I think that I think it's kind of particular records that I remember being completely obsessed with, and now I listen to them but it's just maybe not as good as I remember. But generally speaking, I feel I've had impeccable taste.
So the tracks you brought tonight have all reminded you of being 16. We've already had DJ Shadow, we've had Armand Van Helden. I feel like the next choice is definitely the natural progression from those two. Should we just play it and then talk about it afterwards?
Someone to release me. You're licking your lips and blowing kisses my way, but that don't mean I'm gonna give it away.
There was a moment in the room there where the penny kind of drops everybody, and they went, "Yeah, he's actually playing Genie in a Bottle by Christina Aguilera." Why did you bring that with you?
It's just like I was working. I had a job in a fudge shop in Totnes. If anyone's been, they have franchises. It's called Rolly's Fudge Pantry. The markup of the fudge is 800%, which is
why are we all not in fudge?
I know it's true. And so he had like Radio 1 on all day, and it was the first time I think I had a job where it was just like Radio 1. And I remember a year or so before. There's that Beck album Midnight Vultures, which I was like properly obsessed with. I remember listening to Radio 1 in the fudge shop and hearing this song, and it was like, and I was like, "Is this Beck?" I was like, "This song's pretty cool." And turns out it was Ricky Martin, and it was Living La Vida Loca, which if you listen to, like, I
remember it well.
Like, it's pretty Beckish. Anyway, and listening to Radio 1 like opened up my mind to the charts, and like, you know, most of it was and still is like bad, but occasionally like hear a song like that. So if you're working and you're listening to the radio all day, and you kind of begin to learn about playlists, and it's like, oh, it's that song again. Like, and yeah, like I used to really look forward to Genie in a Bottle coming on, because it's like a really brilliant song, and there's no there's no irony there.
It still sounds good.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Christina Aguilera was kind of presented as like the antidote to Britney Spears or something.
Well, yeah, because Britney Spears at this point, "Hit Me Baby One More Time" was the mega hit.
yeah, and I think it's like if you listen to those two records together, one of them is a very kind of brash, like pop kind of thing, and her like that song is way more like, I don't know, kind of understated, and yeah. Anyway, it's a good song.
Is your appreciation for a really well produced melodic pop tune stayed with you forever, basically? Because when you hear that, you just think, great pop song. Like, do you still feel the same way when you hear a new pop song like that?
Yeah, but I think I can't let myself just like think about it in a completely like cold way. Like, I think the reason that like Hit Me Baby One More Time just does nothing to me or for me, and I don't really like the way it sounds. But like that song there's something about it that's quite kind of emotional and quite nice. So it has to be like, I have to like it in a deeper way, I think.
I want to ask you just a little bit more about the band that you were in. What were they called?
The Upsides.
Okay.
That band.
Yes, and you were sorry, not Metronomy.
No.
It's like, who are these guys?
We're still going. Not Metronomy.
The Upsides. Who was in the Upsides? You were the drummer.
I was
Gabriel
the drummer.
was in it.
It's like, I think we imagine that one day they'll do like a rock family tree of it.
Is there a big money reunion tour coming?
Maybe, yeah. So there's Gabriel was in the band, and then James, who's in Veronica Falls and Ultimate Painting, who've split up. But anyway, yeah, they were, and then this other guy.
The other guy, Ziggy.
There's a guy called Richard Wayne.
What kind of adventures did the Upsides get up to?
We used to play at this place called the Spinning Wheel in Torquay, which was like you play covers all night. Lots of Beatles songs, lots of like The Who, that kind of thing, and then a few originals thrown in there. And then we got to the final of this Battle of the Bands competition once. We went to Leeds with a bus full of people and then lost. We played the night that Muse were offered a record deal in Plymouth. We played a bit earlier on in the night. Okay. It's one of our biggest claims to fames. And we had interest from management. Straight away.
Why did the Upsides go their separate ways in the end?
Because Richard, the singer, moved to Liverpool to be with his girlfriend, now wife.
It's a pretty good excuse.
It was very, because that would have happened, I think, probably when I was 17, I think. Like I was saying earlier, like throughout my life, I had just kind of pushed these like these possible careers out of the way. And I think by the time I was like, it would have been like 16, 17, and he like quit the band, it was genuinely, to this day, like the most heartbreaking thing that's ever happened to me.
For people that aren't sat close to us, Joe's welling up at this point.
I am. I could if I.
I want to test your knowledge of the period when you were 16. So
Yeah.
this is 1998 going into 1999. There was some big stuff happening
Tony
in the
Blair.
world. Tony Blair. Titanic, that was a big deal. It won 11 Oscars and was a film that seemed to be in the cinemas all year. Were you into it? Did you go and see it?
Here's an interesting. We went on a school trip to see Titanic, and I remember.
Wait a second. So you went to Bath Christmas shopping and you went on a school trip to see Titanic?
Like, they wanted me to push the things. They wanted me to cruise. Yeah, I went to see Titanic, and I remember people at the time were like, "It's the longest film ever made," and then people talking about going to the toilet, and some cinemas having an interval so people could go to the toilet. And I remember like being so kind of preoccupied with this thing about the toilet that when I was watching, I was like, "Oh God, I think I'm going to need the toilet." And of course, like halfway through the film, I was like, "Okay, I'm going to go to the toilet." So I left the cinema and went to the toilet. And anyway, since then I've maybe watched it, I don't know, 50 times. And every time I go to the toilet halfway through.
There you go.
Almost like to remind myself.
Yeah. There was a big sporting moment in 1998, which was when a young Michael Owen and David Beckham were playing for England. David Beckham kicked an Argentinian footballer and got sent off in the World Cup. Do you remember that? Were you into football?
Oh yeah, I was, but probably that would have been one of the times when I was least into it, I think.
Okay.
But I remember, unless you're lying,
no,
I remember that happening.
Unless Wikipedia's lying. Just finally, in terms of the music that was big at the time, we've heard Christina Aguilera, which was a huge hit that year. But do you want to take a guess at what the biggest selling album of 1998 was?
I don't know. I mean,
in the UK.
Take That, was it?
No, it was The Cause. Talk on Corners. Sold 1.6 million copies in the UK that year.
I mean, yeah, great.
You didn't bring any Cause.
We went on
a school trip with
hang on a second. Yeah,
see The
we went on a
Cause.
school trip. Yeah. I spent a week with The Cause at the school.
Final couple of things, Jay. You've already mentioned it. You've got children now.
Mm-hmm.
You are a dad. Have you found yourself thinking about what they might be like when they're teenagers? Is it 2 boys you've got?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. And I mean, like, I think I'm going to enjoy it. Like, I think it'll be quite fun for me because I think like I was saying, like, unusually, I know that, like, for a lot of people, teenage years are pretty crap and, like, they don't have much fun, but I think I had a really nice time. So I'm quite looking forward to, I don't know, like, playing computer games, smoking some weed.
You're just going to relive your own teenage years.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm quite looking forward to that. But at the same time, I'm very I'm very aware that for my girlfriend, it's going to be kind of horrible as well. I think having 2 teenage boys
and a
'cause one
dad playing computer games.
Well, no, I mean, I just think I don't know. It's just teenage boys aren't really very nice. I don't think.
If you're going to revisit your 16-year-old self, would you give yourself any advice, given all of your world wisdom now?
I don't think I would really. No.
It sounds like it was pretty good.
No,
to be
but
honest.
but not even really for that reason. I'm not sure. I guess the thing I would say would be like, oh, you should get more into like maths, science, and then I would be like, but like, I just don't understand it. Yeah, I don't know. Like,
would you?
I think all the things I tell myself, I just be like, I know. Yeah, but
would you encourage them to just follow whatever their passion is, regardless of whether it's music?
But I think the weird thing is, right? I think that actually, and maybe it happens still now, but I think maybe it happens more now. But certainly when I was a teenager, like when I was early teens, all that kind of like the GCSE stuff and like double science and all that, like they kind of force you to make quite big decisions quite quickly. And it's like if you ask like a 12-year-old, it's like, oh, what do you wanna be? And then it's like, but really, you're gonna decide now, like, what do you want to be? And I think I remember like friends of mine who would get forced, like who were made to be very academic and didn't really want to be, and it's quite kind of full on. So yeah, I'd just say like ultimately it doesn't matter. Like if you wanna be a skateboarder, like there are some very successful ones out there. Go for it.
Well, listen, Joe, thank you very much for coming and being our guest on Sweet 16 this evening. We've really enjoyed having you. If everybody enjoyed me and giving Joe a warm round of applause to say thanks very much. Sweet 16 is a podcast made by Loud and Quiet. You might also like Midnight Chats, the interview series that's featured guests like Johnny Marr, Laura Marlin, Mike Skinner, Charlotte Gainsbourg, Mac DeMarco, and loads of others. Loud and Quiet also make a magazine. Visit loudandquiet.com for more information.